The story of a young student Camille's acquaintance with her future husband was the most typical for that time. They met at a common student party. All young, energetic, beautiful. The general spirit of the event was imbued with freedom and the desire to live here and now. Of course, it was not without drinking, and how could it be otherwise? After all, at this age it seems that youth will forgive everything, and there is a whole life ahead. You don't have the wisdom that older people have. Camille's friend, with whom she went to the party, was looking for adventure. "Look, this one seems cute, and he's looking at me." The girl furtively pointed at the stranger. "Evelyn, calm down, you'll come to him." "What do you mean?" "It's for everyone." Camille tried to pull her back. "Of course it is." Evelyn didn't like the tone in which she was being addressed, and the message was not a good one. Naturally, the girl changed immediately. "Why should I, like an old woman, sit and wait for the weather? Youth is fading by the minute. We must make use of it. Of course, tomorrow morning you'll be an old woman, you'd think." Camille did not stay in debt and sneered. Evelyn only poked back grudgingly and went off to meet the next guy who caught her eye. It seemed that the liking was mutual, for the girl never thought of returning. Camille sat alone and wondered why she was even here. Evelyn wasn't even her friend, more like acquaintances. She'd called for company so she wouldn't have to go alone. And Camille had agreed. Why? Was it embarrassing to say no? Now, of course, it's clear that it wasn't a good idea. The girl was not at all comfortable with the event. No, she was not a prude, but here everything was too unbridled, too much so-called freedom. It was unusual and therefore uncomfortable. Camille thought it was time for her to leave. Evelyn had gone off with her new acquaintance in an unknown direction and did not seem to be coming back. The only other person Camille knew here was Rick, the landlord. Not even in passing. And he was nowhere to be seen on the horizon. He had long since disappeared from sight in the company of pleasant girls. At least someone was having fun. Someone was enjoying the process, he muttered to himself, and the girl sighed heavily. Of course, one could do as Rick did, try to get acquainted, socialize, since she was here anyway. But except that she didn't feel like having fun at all. The mood was gone. Or was it gone? Unlike her friend, Camille didn't see anyone who seemed like a nice person with whom she could even talk. The crowd around her was in the mood to party like it was the last time. Deciding for the last time to go out on the balcony and have a smoke. The girl was left there alone with a young man she had never seen before. "Do you have a light?" He turned to Camille. "Please." Just like that, the acquaintance began bannily at the refectory. Christopher immediately took a liking to Camille. The thought of going home immediately vanished. "Christopher," he introduced himself. "I've noticed you for a long time. Did you come here with a friend?" "Yeah, you know." The awkwardly started conversation was gaining and gaining momentum. The couple was hanging out and not paying attention to anyone. Everything around them was unimportant. They talked and talked until dawn, drank and, it seems, were already a little in love. Everything ended prosaically and predictably. How could it be different when alcohol, youth and hormones rule? In the morning, even yesterday, strangers to each other, people woke up together in the light of day. When sober, it was a bit embarrassing to even look into the eyes of a partner. That was probably why Camille couldn't stand it and ran home. Christopher only exhaled in relief. He didn't know what to say about the girl himself. He did not want to deceive and promise golden mountains. After all, there was no guarantee that they would meet again. Not to mention any long-lasting future. Yesterday everything was so easy and simple. But now the angle of vision had changed dramatically. I didn't want to lie and promise. Now Camille an unearthly love. With her departure, the young man mentally crossed himself. Thank God he'd figured it out all by himself. It's just a one-time thing, right? Of course, that was exactly how Camille had perceived the night. She had no illusions or rosy dreams that she and Christopher would be together for the rest of their lives. What a thing to say. They didn't know each other almost automatically. Fleur and rose-colored glasses were long lost on the girl. The night spent together was perceived simply as youthful foolishness, dictated by a flash and a momentary impulse. If the young man let the situation go as soon as the door slammed shut behind Camille, it was not so easy for her. Mentally, she understood everything, but she was deeply ashamed. Fool. Just yesterday she had judged Evelyn. How was she any better than she was? Camille cursed and scolded herself. She didn't want to sprinkle ashes on her head either. And what would it change? It was a strategic decision to accept that it was just a pleasant pastime and nothing more. Not to make herself extra nervous, and of course to try to erase this evening and night from her memory. What Camille absolutely did not want was to become the laughingstock of the one who was running after a guy who obviously did not expect to continue the acquaintance. Yes, pride was at play. What's wrong with that? Everything is better than being a restless clingy and not understanding the meaning of the word. No, formally, of course, it was not said yet, but I did not want to wait and force Christopher to put a point. It was better to do it in advance and on one's own. When Camille had made up her mind about what to do next, she finally calmed down and began to forget this awkwardness and immorality. But let him who has never acted once in his life throw a stone at her, foolishly, recklessly. Who has never been ashamed of their actions? It wasn't bad. The humility of the situation was working, and Camille was slowly calming down, as suddenly the completely unforeseen and unexpected happened. A few days later, Christopher himself got in touch, called the girl hello. Camille picked up the phone, even though the number was unfamiliar. Hey, how's it going? She was so confused that at first she didn't even realize who Christopher might be calling. Hi. In a completely confused voice, Camille answered on automatic. How did you get my number? She remembered exactly how she had escaped before the exchange of personal details and contacts. It turned out that E had the number. Do you mind that I called? You could hear in his voice that Christopher was embarrassed. He clearly hadn't expected such a cold greeting. No, why? Then maybe we'll meet again, take a walk. It was extremely unexpected for the girl. She'd already made up her mind in her head, arranged everything. And then everything fell apart. All the predictions and behavior line flew into tatters. Inner Camille hesitated whether to agree. That question was replaced by another. What have I got to lose? So the girl agreed. And so began this rather strange attitude in its fullness. What was it? What do you call it? I don't know. They didn't try to label it. They didn't try to shape it. As Oscar Wilde wrote, to define is to limit. And the young men were probably uncomfortable discussing personal matters, pushing boundaries. Both were afraid of seeming too intrusive, too impatient. So a policy of silence was not the most sensible. But where would it lead? They tried not to think about that either. When they met, they were together. It was good. But when saying goodbye and parting, it seems that the young people both thought about the fact that they might not meet again. It was strange, but just no hopes, false expectations and illusions. And so their parting continued until another call with the suggestion maybe we could meet again. On its own, Camille would have liked more certainty. She could barely restrain herself not to press Christopher against the wall and not to start asking dozens of questions that she had accumulated during this time. Except that at this age, ego and pride played a huge role in behavior. The things that adults easily step over for the sake of their goals cannot be betrayed when they are young. What was the girl most afraid of? Of course, being laughed at and rejected. She was afraid that her feelings and her ego would be hurt. Worse, the story of the relationship could become the subject of other people's discussion. Turn out Christopher wasn't as decent as she now believed, and it all kept in the back of her mind when making key decisions. With risks like that, it went without saying that it was best to leave things as they were. All of this combined to dictate the girl's line of behavior, namely restraint, calmness, and silent waiting. Of course, this behavior of Camille's only pleased Christopher. He, as it seemed to him, had found his ideal. The one who does not make a scene and does not try to get to the bottom of things, pestering with meaningless conversations. Wouldn't it be nice to have what he wanted? No strings attached and no tedious conversations. Isn't unfulfilled blue dreams for his age? Young Green. Unlearned by bitter experience with women, he took everything at face value while Camille went crazy. As it turned out, that wasn't the main problem. What thundered to Camille was the fact that she was late. She looked at the calendar and couldn't believe that this was actually happening to her. Weren't they being careful? Right now about the key everything in her head. The girl realized that excesses were not excluded. At first there was a terrible panic. Pulling herself together, the girl went to the pharmacy and purchased a pregnancy test. After receiving the results of the express test, the anxiety only increased 2 stripes. How come? But we were careful. Camille was nearly tearing her hair out. Of course, she never thought she'd get pregnant. But she should have, of course. But youth is characterized by carelessness and faith in the best, which overshadows facts and reason. Deciding to have accurate information, rather than relying on a test from the pharmacy, the girl went to the Women's Counseling Center. There is still hope for a failure in the body, for the fact that the test was defective. In general, Camille was in a stage of denial until she was ready to face reality, except that the gynecologist who performed the ultrasound was uncompromising in her conclusions. Well, my dear Tracy, congratulations. 5th week of pregnancy, is it for sure? Camille asked fearfully. Without a doubt, the woman cut her off. There, look at the screen. You see that fleshy egg? The girl looked at the monitor and could not believe it had happened. Tell about the options, tiredly exhaled the gynecologist. Needless to say, she saw such frightened young girls several a day. Unfortunately, not all of them were prudent. What were the options? Camille was even more frightened. The doctor was about to open her mouth, trying to match her words to her, but the pregnant woman interrupted her. No, what do you mean? No, of course not. I'm going to keep the pregnancy. Such uncertainty pleasantly surprised the woman. And that's fine. Then let's go to the table and I'll tell you what to do next. She stopped being so threatening. She already liked a patient who didn't hesitate for a second. You don't find those very often anymore. Unfortunately, which deeply disappointed the doctor, she was fed up with young girls who thought differently and then went to terminate the pregnancy as if nothing had happened. As if it's so easy and simple. And it was possible to understand such a position of already not young doctor. But no, for us there was no question. She knew she couldn't terminate the pregnancy. It's her baby, her baby. How could we? The girl tried not to judge the choices of other women, but for herself the choice was obvious. No doubts it would not be easy. There were no illusions either. To begin with, the girl was only 20 years old. This on the one hand, and not a small amount, but for motherhood was not enough independence. She didn't even have any. She was just learning. So she had to confess to her parents and beg them for help. Moreover, there had to be some way of talking to Christopher. But how? Especially in light of their non-committal relationship, his paternity of the mother-to-be was not in doubt. Of course, he was the only man she had in this time period. But would he believe her? How would he react? What would he say? These thoughts were terribly depressing. Should I even tell him? How did I get into such a mess? The girl scolded herself. Well, now it was necessary to think about the future. Camille went home and reasoned about what they and the baby awaited further. But the conversation with the guy was decided to postpone a little. First, it was worth talking to her parents at dinner. The daughter did not delay, she announced. Mom, Dad, I'm sorry for my short-sightedness. I don't think you're going to like this, but I'm expecting a baby, which was squealed back by Emily, Camille's mom. What did you just say? The girl could not answer. She continued to stare silently at her plate and was afraid to raise her eyes. Emily calmed down. The father tried to reassure the audience. Camille, let's be constructive. Camille, tell me. It's okay. All in order. You can't just drop an information bomb like that and shut up. Yes, Emily wouldn't stop. Give us the details, we're listening. I'm not just saying this for Camille. Calm down. No one is dead. Everything is fine. Tell us. In the eyes of the girl's mother there were already tears, bitterness and despair. She wanted grandchildren, but not now. Camille is still too young, almost a child herself. Meanwhile, having plucked up courage, Camille began to talk in some detail about both Christopher and the fact that they were not quite a couple. As it happens. Sorry, she was crying herself. Sure, it wasn't what you wanted. But now what? It's okay. Calm down. You've decided you want to keep the baby, Camille summarized calmly. The daughter only nodded in reply. We'll raise it. Stephen, are you as calm as a Buddhist monk? Is that normal? Tell me, please, how does your screaming help? Father humbly analyzed the situation. Will your ultrasound change anything? The pregnancy will dissolve on its own. We have to work with what we have. Camille is having a baby and wants to keep it. That's it. But you can't react like that. The more emotional Emily was looking for an outlet for her emotions and calmness. Her spouse was just annoying her. Let's go talk in private. The parents knocked on their daughter's room about an hour later. During that time, Camille heard her mother yell several times. Of course, she understood her reaction as a girl, and she was ashamed and embarrassed herself. But Dad was right, too. What would Screen do now? Camille, Mom and I talked. It's okay. Don't worry, it's not good for you. I'm sorry. Dad's right. We'll support you, of course, and we'll help in any way we can. Emily was much calmer now. I guess she'd let off some steam. Please forgive me. Camille couldn't stand it anymore, she cried. Her parents both rushed to calm her down, saying that everything would be fine and everything would work out. Nothing terrible happened. That's how the family evening ended. The parents did not ask a word about Christopher, the father of the future baby. And the girl herself didn't say anything. Probably a sense of tact hinted to her parents that when Camille was ready, she would tell them everything herself. But she wasn't ready at all. The next day, when her parents went to work, she finally plucked up the courage to dial Christopher's number for the first time. Hi. The young man started the conversation in a friendly manner. Yeah, hi. Listen, we can see each other right away. I have a serious conversation. The girl was literally shaking with fear. Who knew how difficult this very banal phrase was for her? Of course, today was how the fateful meeting was scheduled. Judging by Christopher's playful tone, the girl realized the young man did not take her seriously. Probably thought that this joke was just an excuse to meet and nothing more. Her guesses were confirmed by the fact that at the meeting Christopher came joyful and clearly unsuspecting. But the girl who waited for him was whiter than a sheet. In order not to change her mind, not to wash away the soul of the unclean, Camille said everything at once, right in the forehead. Why delay the inevitable? Christopher, I'm pregnant. And that's when the smile flew off his face in a second. A pause was taken for a few seconds. Christopher seemed to be trying to digitize the information he had received. Are you sure? 100%. Yesterday I went to the antenatal clinic. Of course, Camille expected this question and immediately handed her partner a paper from the clinic. You can look at it. He didn't even look at it. He was clearly not interested. If you put your hand on your heart, the girl was most afraid of the next question, which was to be asked according to the laws of the genre. Are you sure it's my baby? Morally, she tried to adjust herself to the fact that this is a legitimate question, given the nature of their relationship. But it was still very frustrating. All the preparations had been in vain. Christopher did not ask. He asked another question that was natural but so painful. What to do now? I've made up my mind for myself. I'm not going to terminate the pregnancy. It's not my way. It's clear that I can't demand anything from you or insist on anything. Do you have a choice too? It was certainly not improvised. The girl had prepared and she had time. Just like that, out of the blue. Still in obvious shock and confusion. The young man could be understood. The future mother and did not think to judge him harshly. The memories of her own reaction were still too fresh in her mind. Christopher, decide for yourself. I told you it was my duty, I think so. What's more, I told you what my plan was. And you don't think I'm going to press you for anything, ask you for anything? Think. Without waiting for an answer, the girl started from the bench and walked towards the house. The young man remained seated there and stared after her. Being at a complete loss, she was choked with tears. The feeling of resentment she tried to chase away from her. What was she resenting Christopher for? Had he promised her something? So how did she have the right to expect a different reaction from him? Having a rational conversation with herself. With some auto-training, Camille calmed down, tried to accept the situation as it was, without false hopes and illusions. That would only make it even more painful later. Who needs it? There was a painful period of waiting, though Camille tried to convince herself that there was nothing to hope for. But how could feelings be forbidden? The answer was silence. Almost 3 days had passed. Christopher had neither called nor written. It was understandable, really. Yes, the lack of consent, multiplied by time, equals no, as was correctly said in some movie. On the first day, the girl was still very much waiting for a call, believed, and now she has already stopped hoping. And thank you very much to the parents that they kept silent and did not ask questions about the father of the child. It seems that they understood everything themselves and decided not to cause unnecessary pain to the daughter. So from the outside, it was obvious that it was not easy for her to accept the fact that she was becoming a single mother. Christopher called unexpectedly on the 5th day, when Camille had given up waiting. "Camille, tell me, can I come to you?" The young man said cheerfully. He was cheerful, as if there had been no meeting a few days ago and a difficult conversation, and the request was, to put it mildly, unusual. "But you do realize that I have parents at home now," just in case, the girl clarified, to avoid unnecessary misunderstandings. "There were already enough of them off the top of my head. That's what I'm counting on." Even more cheerfully, Christopher replied. Good. The mother-to-be was completely confused. She had given up expecting any good outcome at this point. Indeed, an hour later, Christopher appeared in person. Camille to the end preferred to think it was a prank. After all, in order not to be disappointed, she should have just not charmed C. But it was true. There he is on the doorstep. The father of her future child stands in a suit with flowers. Emily answered the door. "Hello, Volkov. Good evening. I'm Christopher. I came to talk to you." The conversation was about meeting the parents. The young man recognized that he had to take responsibility. So the purpose of his visit was, in fact, matchmaking. "I'm thinking that if things are going to work out this way, maybe Camille and I should get married. I don't want the baby to grow up in a broken home." The parents looked at each other in silence, searching for understanding. Camille asked her daughter, "Camille, what do you think? Do you want to marry Christopher? Or how do you see your life and the baby's life and the baby's life in the future?" Honestly, she had no idea. She used to have a detailed plan, a course to accomplish her goals. Now it's all turned upside down in a week. Everything that had happened had changed everything too drastically. What to do now? There was no answer. As it happens, squeezed out of himself a girl literally through force, "I do not mind to marry. Are you right? Of course, it is better that the baby has a full family." Parents shrugged their shoulders, and what were they to say in this situation? Everything had already happened beyond their will. They only cared about the future of their grandson or grandchild, and their daughter's amusement and manic status game was better not to interfere. Camille should decide for herself. After all, she is an adult and should be able to make decisions. Stephen did not like this awkwardness between the young ones, didn't like that their marriage was originally built on a phrase, but as it happened. It had been said by both Christopher and Camille, but that was the way it was. You can't take words out of a song. As for Emily, she tried not to think about the future marriage of her daughter in a negative way. She simply relied on fate, on the fact that it would be as it should be. In general, this is how the future newlyweds themselves felt about it. Both of them thought, what if it works out? And decided to try. Camille reasoned in such a way that to lose that, to become a single mother, I will always have time. And you can't argue. The couple became newlyweds 4 months after meeting each other. Moreover, they were preparing to become parents. Very quickly, this pace of life was frightening. Frankly, both of them to death. But how do you slow down? There's a baby on the way. You've got to think about him. The problem was that the future newlyweds hardly knew each other. Young, proud, trying to appear to be something they're not. It's a potent mix. And now it was time for the reckoning. Life went on, and the couple tried to rub off on each other. They had to deal with some surprises. As it turned out, with the real Christopher and Camille Young were not familiar. Accelerated program of acquaintance with the shortcomings and unpleasant traits of character was greatly aggravated by the joint household. As it is known, the love boat of many couples beats on the household. And here in the guy's situation, it's a real scare. Joint life kills all the good things that came before it. A lot of things are forced into the open. What's a couple to do if they didn't have much in common to begin with? What is there to sin against the truth? They were both tempted to end it now. There was no stamp in the passport, no official papers yet. But on the other hand, Camille and Christopher reasoned to themselves. To break up at once, having faced the first failures, the first difficulties, it's strange. They were having a child together. It made things very difficult. In general, the behavior of future spouses and parents was mostly dictated not by common sense, but rather by guilt and morality. Probably their previous behavior and not so clever actions in the past. Scaremongering. Now to do the wrong thing again. Somehow there is an illusion that it is difficult and hard. These are the obligatory companions of the right faithful path. Afraid to alarm her parents with her new life twists and turns, Camille complained to her friend Vanessa. As it turns out, living together this one really isn't that much fun. And Christopher, you just don't know what he's really like. When we were dating, it was different. The girl who cussed, what were you guys dating? It was nothing. And in fact, we spent less time together than that. How could you recognize him? At first, all people are on their best behavior, showing their best qualities and carefully hiding their shortcomings. Like you've never done that. I'm sure he's yawning now too. Vanessa wisely tried to reason with her friend. Oh, of course you're right. Everything should be different from the beginning. Camille sighed bitterly. But don't cry now. What difference will it make? It's already happened, that's clear. But what to do now? Disappointed, wondered her friend. It's up to the two of you. We need to talk, discuss everything behind the scenes, amongst yourselves. It's your relationship. Why would you drag a third party into it? Talk to Christopher first. I'm afraid to talk to him. Camille, face it. You were afraid to talk to him when you were dating, afraid to discuss your relationship status. And what happened? Where did it get you? What do you have to lose anyway? Vanessa was a little annoyed by her friend's behavior. She didn't understand why she couldn't just pull herself together and act like an adult, take responsibility. Soon she'll be a mother herself, but she's still doing the same thing. She's afraid of something. Yes, Vanessa, I realize with my head that you are right, but my hormonal background dictates its own rules and laws. I'm fighting it with all my might. Fight it. It's good to use your head when it comes to important matters. Stop hiding in the bushes. Just sit down and have a quiet word with Christopher. I'm sure he has a lot of questions and fears too. The two of you discuss it. Now you're going to have to be patient. You're going to have to make some sacrifices. Both of you drop your selfishness. You have a baby on the way. You owe him first. Surprisingly, Vanessa was able to turn Camille's head in the right direction. She could talk sense. Now the girl decided to have a word with Christopher. Indeed, they have a lot of joint obligations. They need to learn to work together. Vanessa is absolutely right. Camille really had no choice but to sit down and have a serious talk with Christopher. She was prepared for the worst, but surprisingly, her new husband was very reasonable. They jointly came to the conclusion that the current situation is the result of their joint mistakes. What now is the need to stop being selfish for the sake of the baby, to find common ground and compromise. I understand everything, Christopher admitted dejectedly. Of course, now we need to be considerate of each other, including not going out of our way to snap. On the contrary, we need to stick together. To the surprise of the future mom, not only she was tormented by internal contradictions, a clear and thorough heart-to-heart talk clarified. Christopher is also in turmoil. It was not easy for him either. It literally shook the girl. As it turned out, some problems can really be solved if you just talk and not be blind to the partner. Except that the idyll of the internal relations of the spouses did not last long at all. There were many factors that had their detrimental effect. It was the time of real turmoil in the house. Both parents guessed that a newborn baby is difficult, but that so much sun literally drove them crazy. Neither Camille nor Christopher were prepared for such difficulties. Also a huge thank you to the parents who were always on hand. Problems with their son, with John, arose literally at every step. That lack of sleep, the baby was very restless, then problems with feeding. The young mom lost milk, then allergies, then rashes. It seemed that the difficulties fell like from the horn of plenty. Naturally, these difficulties overlapped with the couple's previous problems. Before the birth of their son, Camille and her husband had not been able to become very close people and build their relationship. And then the chasm between them began to grow. They became distant and self-focused, and it just didn't occur to them to solve problems together. Such an approach also requires a certain maturity and inner maturity. Time was running at breakneck speed. The new year was already looming on the horizon, the first holiday for the baby and the first for this family. John was to be only 2 months old at the beginning of January. It turned out to be years. How deadly the young mother was driven. The parents wisely watched the young one's life from the sidelines and refused to interfere, so they helped with the grandson. Of course, their help was enormous. They helped financially, but it was taboo to interfere in the young people's lives. Emily found this approach very difficult, but Camille strictly forbade his wife any comments. From the outside, they could see, of course, that their daughter's marriage is already hanging by a thread. To give the young a chance to be alone on the walls, the parents offered to take with them. They were leaving for the New Year holidays to visit their grandmother, Stephen's mother. This proposal was a real surprise and a gift, although it was very hard for the young mother to part with her tiny son. But the girl realized that her strength is running out. She urgently needed a break. And who else could she entrust John to but the nearest and dearest people? Yes, Camille had changed her social role and became a mother and mom in the moment. But she so wanted a sip of freedom. She missed her past life so much. It sounded terribly moral, even in her mind, which was probably why she was shying away from them. Admitting to such a desire seemed to devalue the importance of a child in her life. Despite the guilt developing from within, the girl wanted to break away for a moment, to forget about responsibility, about problems, about duty. Of course, Camille also dreamed that she and her husband would celebrate the New Year together. Maybe time alone together would help them. But Christopher had other plans. The husband was not going to be alone with Camille on New Year's Eve. The thing is, he was moonlighting as a musician. More precisely, he played guitar in a band in a pub. Naturally, the most popular evenings for this profession are when other people are out partying, celebrating and marking. Camille was truly furious. In response to her spouse's confession, "Don't you understand?" she appealed to Christopher's common sense. "I mean, we really need the money. This is a great opportunity. Their guitarist is going on vacation with his family. It's a great opportunity. Do you realize how exclusive this chance to be alone together is? Or do you think it's insignificant? Parents are going away, taking John with them. I want to be with you when I get the chance." It's all sweet romance, of course. But maybe as a mother of a family, you'll think more pragmatically, take a more down-to-earth view of things. We need money like air, and it's going to pay very well, plus huge tips. Guys say last New Year's Eve, about 15,000. Everyone brought that much from orders, which is insignificant. Christopher was pissed. Agreed, the wife. Very substantial. But then take me with you to the restaurant. Let's not alone, but we'll be together. Do you realize that I go not to have fun and work? Christopher shouted at him. These exalted sentimental moods, Camille, was completely incomprehensible. And actually you realize that we are talking about New Year's Eve. It's just not possible to take you with us. All the tables are booked almost a month in advance. There's not a single seat available, which makes sense. All these explanations sounded reasonable, and the sane parts of the girl's intellect understood that. But what was to be done with the emotions that overwhelmed? Camille cried and felt sorry for herself. Why are things turning out this way? Why is everyone against me? Of course, to this was added all sorts of disturbing hysterical thoughts, not based on facts in the spirit of "he just does not want to be with me." What can I do? Hormonal background of the new mother still did not come to normal, and fatigue and problems did not add calmness, but only aggravated the situation. Camille felt abandoned. If she had known in advance about Christopher's plans, she would have gone with her parents. But now the tickets were gone, so there were no options left. She would spend New Year's Eve all alone with her problems. To be honest, the young mother was already preparing for the worst celebration of her life. To sleep through everything so as not to envy those who will spend the new year in the company of family and friends. To the rescue of a friend, Vanessa. As it turned out, she broke up with a young man, and now she did not want to go anywhere. On the contrary, she wanted peace and quiet. So the friend suggested, "How do you feel about just sitting together at your house?" This variant of the holiday, of course, was also not a dream come true, but there was no choice. Vanessa had already gone against her wishes just to support Camille, so of course it was necessary to thank her and to act excited. And Camille was touching herself. You shouldn't be so ungrateful. You're not alone anymore. What's to unravel? And in general, surprisingly, the evening wasn't as rotten as Moose had anticipated. The girls were talking about their own stuff. It was heart to heart, peaceful and good at heart. They deliberately did not want to talk about problems this evening. To hell with it. Not tonight. There was a whole New Year's Eve ahead to deal with chaos and problems. The friends were already clearing the table, getting ready to drink tea and call it a night, when Camille's cell phone rang. The number I do not know, but Alice does not sign the call as spam or unwanted. The girl was surprised. Would you answer it? I don't know. At this hour, who's calling who? There's someone very persistent. Okay, Camille exhaled and pressed the green button. Go ahead, Camille. A strange girl drunk giggled into the phone. Hi. Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year. Who is it? We didn't. But don't worry, we're about to correct that misunderstanding. You tell me you're waiting for your husband when you think he's so good. I'm stupid with him. Don't wait for him. And let him go, you fool. Do you know how many of them he has? And the stranger poked at the end. He certainly has one wife. Camille retorted in a stony voice. But how many fools he's got? That's for you to know. You little brat, weigh yourself, the girl said. Do you think you're the smartest one who gave birth? I'm an echo. Just like you were a dog, you're still a dog. How do you like the horns? Do you like sitting alone and waiting for your fella to get his? Even listening was unbearable. Camille disconnected herself and silently sat back down at the table. Vanessa only heard her friend's speech, but that, yes, and the expression on her face was enough to realize she hadn't heard anything good. What about Camille? The girl tried to get Camille's attention, but she just stared at a point. She was just in a panic. Camille didn't respond or react in any way. He completely withdrawn. Oh my God, what is it? In a fit of despair, the girl said, and that's when Camille burst into tears. She had a real hysteria after this delayed reaction, after the withdrawal into herself. She was crying and couldn't say anything. The tears came in hailstones. Unhappy, confused Vanessa, no matter how hard she tried, could not achieve anything. It took more than half an hour to calm the young mother down. God, tell me exactly who called, what they said. Camille confusedly recounted everything the tipsy stranger had told her. And you believed it? Vanessa asked with a raised eyebrow. Why not? Is it possible? All right. The main thing is not to wind up on the walls. Everything's going to be okay. There's no need to get upset and get so upset before you know it. You don't know anything yet. You're right about that. Camille was finally coming to her senses. I don't know anything, but I know what you've decided to do. Her friend stared at her fearfully. Naturally, Vanessa was frightened by this cold and humble tone, especially in contrast to the hysteria she'd witnessed some 15 minutes ago. What would be an appropriate reaction on my part? What do you think? Camille answered a question with a question. What? A very wild scandal. How will Christopher come home? In response to her friend's assumption, Camille only laughed out loud, which frightened Vanessa even more. Are you serious? Scandal. How am I supposed to know what you're thinking? You know, you scare the hell out of me. Are you sure you're okay? Maybe some water or valerian? Yeah, I'm fine. It wasn't the information that killed me. It was the tons. The way that bitch talks like a condescending, pretend polite asshole. No, of course not. I won't say a word about any of it. Calls. And you won't say a word either because you won't. Of course I'll keep quiet if I have to. But I don't understand what's not to understand. Camille interrupted. What do you think that woman was hoping for when she called me, when she told me all that? Naturally, for a scandal, for shouting, for clarification of relations. Am I going to go along with her? No way. Vanessa thought on that side of her mind she didn't look at the situations. Let's say it's even smart, intelligent. What do you plan to do then? I don't know, shrugged Christopher's spouse. But certainly not something that will make that bitch happy to play to her tune. I'll fire her, but of course you'll have to find out everything, in detail. Check it out. I don't understand. Why do you need details? You either believe Christopher or you don't. Why do you need details? Exactly, because I don't want to just jump to conclusions. That's stupid. I want to gather all the information, get the whole picture. It's stupid to act on what's essentially an anonymous tip. I have to think about the fact that the decision to break up and divorce is too drastic. It will completely change not only my life, but John's life as well. I'm a mother. I need to think of my son first. Listen, admire, watch. Sounds very sensible for a man who's been banging his head on a table for half an hour. She was making a joke to lighten things up a bit. I just feel like that call was the last straw. The thing that finally snapped me out of it. So many problems I've been having lately. Camille was sincere in sharing what was going on in her heart. I've been holding it all in, trying to clean up and calm the heat of the moment. And then the last chord, and that was it. It's understandable. John, do you really have a restless boy? My friend nodded. I didn't understand only one thing, but this call, does it confirm your personal conjectures? What do you think about Christopher's fidelity? How do you feel about it? Honestly, I do. I think he's seeing someone. There's a number of circumstantial signs, but I thought it was a steady girlfriend. This one said something about there being a lot of women. I don't know if Camille cut her own line of reasoning short, but either way, I definitely need more and more detailed information for a divorce. I already said reasonable. Only that's how you intend to find out everything you want to know. Vanessa asked. You're not going to follow him? Yeah, by myself. Preferably with John on your arm. Yes, parried the girl. No, I have a personal stash. Maybe he should have a specially trained person with it? That would be more accurate. What? Vanessa laughed out loud. Have you been watching sentimental and detective dramas on TV? Is there no time in the spirit? I don't know. Think about it. It's not on fire yet, Camille said. She was already surprised at the strange remark she had thoughtlessly uttered out loud. Fortunately, she managed to change the topic of conversation to something distracting. And more on New Year's morning. They didn't touch the topic again. Vanessa, probably too, was tired of the endless discussion of personal life and problems of her friend. In general, it is worth admitting that at that minute Camille rather heartily threw the fact that she wanted to turn to a professional to keep an eye on her husband. But the more time passed, the more she thought about it, the calmer she took it. Could it really not be a bad idea? Wondered the newlywed in private. Camille looked at her husband, at his behavior, and she had more and more doubts. Plus that call on New Year's Eve, which of course she couldn't forget, and endlessly replayed in her head. What to do in such a situation? Sit down and have a straight talk with Christopher while moving him to the wall. And if it's still malicious accusations? What then? Suspicion will only permanently ruin an already fragile relationship. Worse, what if Christopher was just lying to his face? Camille didn't want to be a fool for sure. She didn't want to be the wife who believed everything. And there's a hell of a lot going on behind her back. Anyway, whatever it was, something had to be done. There were no more options, not even stupid or presentable. So Camille made up her mind. Yes, she went to a private detective. It turned out to be not cheap, which is to be expected. But what to do? She looked at several sites and on the internet reviews and chose a specialist who outwardly made a favorable impression. The choice was made, but the girl kept procrastinating. Of course she was scared. True, she desired her and was afraid at the same time, because knowing everything, it will no longer be possible to close your eyes. It took a little time to regain her resolve. To hell with it. I'm not. With these thoughts, Camille dialed the number listed on the website and made an appointment with the detective. The fear still hadn't gone anywhere. But the young mother is just tired of agonizing over how much more. It's hurting her and her nervous system. And Camille needs a healthy son. The meeting was scheduled in 2 days, and this time the girl spent like needles. The emotional swings began. Several times she wanted to call and cancel the whole thing. Camille relocated herself. A nice adult man came to the cafe at the appointed time, just like the photo on the website. Good afternoon, are you Camille? In a pleasant voice he interrogated. Hello, yes, you are Robert. Nice to meet you. Then, having completed their session of common courtesy, they got down to business. What exactly do you need? What kind of results are you hoping for? The detective asked. Result, I just want to know exactly whether my husband is cheating on me or not. And if he is, it would be nice to find out with whom, when, and where. In general, as many details as possible. Okay, Robert smiled. Don't worry, it's not a problem for me. I get this kind of request several times a week. And how's that going? No dissatisfaction with my work, the detective emphasized in a serious tone. That's not what I mean. Camille smiled softly. I'm more interested in the statistics. Often wives are unreasonably suspicious of their other halves. Honestly, they're always right, unfortunately. But don't worry, maybe your case will be an exception. The girl could hardly believe it, but she liked Robert's straightforwardness and honesty. It took a little more time to settle the formalities. I had to sign a contract for services, settle accounts, pay advances, and so on. Camille, don't be so nervous. The fact that I'll be watching won't affect the situation. It's already the way it is. For some reason, this phrase has developed Christopher's spouse very much. Simple really, but very wise. Whatever Camille does, it will have no effect on what is already happening behind her back. Camille returned home that evening extremely spirited. First of all, she was proud of herself for stepping over herself and doing what she was so afraid of. In the second place, Camille was anticipating the end of the story. As it was, it would all be cleared up soon. There would be no need to constantly think and analyze every word and deed of her husband. How tired she was of it, of this state of inner upheaval. The young woman became quite bold and asked her mother a question. Mom, do you think that all men cheat? Emily literally dumbfounded, noticing with a plate in her hand. Why all of a sudden such questions? What's wrong? The woman panicked at the same second. I'm just wondering. What do you think, Camille? Is Christopher or Daddy up to? No, not at all. Just thinking out loud. Don't worry. So you just can't philosophize hypothetically? No, Emily was totally unprepared for such discussions, even hypothetically. The daughter retreated without bread and was already very sorry that she did not restrain her emotional outburst and what she was thinking about. She knew her mother's character. Now she wouldn't calm down, she'd keep on thinking different things. And Camille? She had a lot to think about. Time passed. Robert did not announce himself, although they had agreed to contact each other only after the final result. It was still very unsettling. Christopher was less and less at home. Of course, he was covering up his constant absence with some scumbags, but Camille didn't believe a word of it. It took the detective a whole week to find out everything in detail. Robert called and set up a meeting at the same cafe. She really wanted to ask him about the results of his work right here and now on the phone. But the detective's tone already hinted unambiguously. The good news was not to be expected. He had gotten himself worked up into a frenzy. Camille showed up early for the meeting. We had to wait for Robert, which only added to the nervous tension. Finally, he showed up. Hello, Camille. I can see it in you. You figured it out. Yes, I think I understand. But I want to know the details. As much detail as possible. So in his bag looking for the file, the detective told you yes, Christopher is unfaithful to you. He has a steady mistress. In all this time, I've never seen any other girl with him. Just this one. I have the pictures now, take a look. The detective put a folder with photos on the table. From horror and shock, the girl said inside. There was a lump in her throat. She knew what was near her husband. Of course, how could one not recognize it? It was her mother's own sister, Camille Jenna's own aunt. Comments were, really, unnecessary. There was no doubt that Christopher and Jenna were lovers. In the photo, they were holding hands, kissing, hugging. Basically, they were acting like lovers. She's the one he was dating. Why would she ask that stupid, rhetorical question? Was it stress, or did she want to hear confirmation again? Though what was there to say, words were unnecessary. The detective only nodded. He was used to constant adultery. But Camille, her reaction somehow unpleasantly scratched his soul. Sergei himself wanted to talk to Christopher to ask why he would do this. There is a woman after all. She's young, beautiful, she gave birth to a child and she's killing herself. That's my own aunt, Camille said for some reason. But to say that the detective was surprised is an understatement. He almost blurted it out. Good thing it wasn't my mother. Cynicism is a defensive mental reaction. The situation, however, was not typical from the beginning. And this young girl, on the contrary, was pitiful. Why did you do that to her? I mean, literally, with her face on the table. Couldn't she just tell the whole truth? It was Robert who could talk about the situation at that moment. Camille was incapable. It was too big a blow. She was mentally prepared for the fact that Christopher had a mistress. You might say that this was not news, but the identity of the mistress, how could Jenna? The girl said goodbye to the detective as if in a fog. She did not even remember how she handed him the money for the work done. Camille walked home from the meeting without finally putting all that had happened into her head. Was that even possible? She had to pull herself together, get a grip on herself. But how? From time to time, Camille stopped to take out her bag and look at the pictures again, to make sure that this was not a dream, that this was indeed a harsh reality. Impossible. As soon as she started thinking about Jenna, her favorite aunt. How could this even happen? Unable to bear it, the girl started dialing her best friend. She had to share this nightmare with someone immediately. What would Vanessa say? How would she react? Maybe she could offer some advice. When Vanessa picked up the phone, Camille began to ramble on about what had happened. His mistress, my Aunt Jenna, summed up the young wife sadly. That banished her friend so loudly that people on the street began to turn around on her. You didn't hear? Yes, Jenna? Vanessa, what do I do now? What am I supposed to do? I'm in shock. Wait, that's right. I can't believe it. I have the pictures in my hand. It's all accurate. How could they be? Vanessa was loudly indignant. Only now Camille realized that calling her friend had not been the best idea. Now she was forced to confirm again and again that the detective was not mistaken, and to help her friend through the shock. How could she do that when she herself had not come to her senses? Surprisingly, Vanessa oriented herself much better. She was still very hurt and resentful of her friend. But it wasn't that emotionally destabilizing. What do you think you're going to do now? I wish I'd known. When I first thought about cheating, I thought I'd come in and throw Christopher's stuff out of the house and kick him out. And now what? Don't you want to talk to that Aunt Jenna of yours? Vanessa asked. Of course I do. You have no idea how much. Look, what if you know the meeting place from your detective? Do you know what time Christopher gets there? Why don't you just show up there yourself? You'd end up all together, the three of you, the friend reasoned. I'm afraid if you talk to them both separately, they'll lie. They'd be up against the wall. Camille wondered why it hadn't occurred to her to do that. It's a snail's right. It's an option. Yeah, that's exactly what I'll do. That's about the time they're meeting. I'll call a cab and we'll talk. Okay, Camille, Vanessa tried to stop her friend. You be careful out there. No killing. That's not going to do anyone any good. Or maybe I could come and be with you, be supportive. But no, that would be a circus. I'll call you after. Then you promised you wouldn't do anything stupid. Vanessa asked sternly. I'll try. Camille disconnected and started looking for a cab aggregator app on her phone. On nerves, she even dragged her arms a little. Maybe we shouldn't go anywhere. Tried to pitch my voice once, but the girl waved it away. She couldn't wait to meet her lovers, to look them both in the eyes. Okay, Christopher's husband, he's only technically her husband, all things considered. But how could Jenna do this to her? That's what was bugging her. Already 40 minutes later, the cheating spouse pulled up to the address the detective had shared with her. Taking a deep breath, the girl turned toward the entryway. She was already starting to frantically figure out how she was going to get in. Except the door wasn't locked. Lucky someone put up a brick, no matter what's going on with the lock, every time she walked into the entryway. Camille immediately heard the noise of echo, a good spread, and the sounds of someone somewhere loudly figuring things out. The surprises continued. As she approached the right apartment, she found the doors swung open. As it turned out, the arguing was coming from there. Camille froze on the threshold as she realized who the voices belonged to. Only now, coming closer, did she recognize them. There could be no doubt there were three voices in the apartment being abused by Jenna, Christopher. And then there was Emily. Camille simply could not be wrong. The third person involved in the scandal was her mother. How did she get in there? How did she even know about Christopher's affair with her aunt? She'd known for a long time. Camille had a lot of questions as the door was open. The girl took the opportunity and listened. But given the volume of the shouts and their expressive nary a damn thing could be made out. They also tried to interrupt each other, apparently proving their point. It was a huge scandal. What am I supposed to do now? I thought Camille would come in and be the center of attention. but at least this way I'll dot all the I's and T's at once. And I won't have to suffer anymore. I just have to endure it. That settled it. The girl realized that no matter how painful it is now, it must be past. It's better to cut off the tail at once, without sentimentality. It was scary, of course. But what to do? She had too many questions. Now there were more. To her mom, Vanessa was absolutely right. Need to talk to them all together to prevent the possibility of shifting responsibility or lying. Gathering all her will in a fist, Camille stepped inside to where the voices were coming from. The girl entered noiselessly and stopped in the doorway, staring at those present with all eyes. This sudden appearance shocked everyone. Seeing Camille in the doorway, all three of them looked at her in silence. There was no more shouting and fighting. Everything had faded into the background. "Why are you suddenly so quiet?" The girl asked quietly and very calmly. "I want to hear what the hell is going on here, too." All three of them looked at each other. They couldn't find the words to answer. It really wasn't easy. "Kitten, calm down." Emily was the first to wake up. "Let's get out of here. I'm on my way." "Did you know everything?" Yes, her daughter interrupted her. "A long time ago." The woman flinched as if slapped. It was only then that Camille noticed that her mother had tears in her eyes. "Well, let's start with you then." Camille was addressing her lovers. "Do you want to tell me how you could?" "Jenna, how could you? What was there to say?" No one could find the words. Everyone was tired, exhausted, and didn't know what to say in their defense. Were there any words that could justify what they had done? Christopher and Jenna said nothing. They looked guiltily anywhere but at Camille. But the girl wasn't going to just walk away. She wanted the truth, wanted to hear something. She needed to understand. "What about Kevin?" "Jenna." "Fine by me. In fact, have you forgotten how old you are?" "What's your age difference with Christopher?" The young mother was furious. "Camille, the first thing Jenna said was we didn't mean to hurt you." "Come on, we fell in love at first sight," Christopher suddenly retorted. The sweet couple's ridiculous excuses only made us angrier. "And where did you meet when you fell in love so abruptly?" Sarcastically interrogated Camille. "Where?" "At our wedding," Christopher explained ingenuously. That confession made Camille feel even worse. Thankfully, there was a chair beside her, to which she sank silently. The sisters were now both looking at the young man in fury. Sure is a good helper. Jenna didn't even hold back and whispered at him. Mom stood her ground, turned to Emily. "The girl didn't tell me for some reason. Did you really think it would be better if I stayed happily ignorant on the walls?" The mother rushed to her daughter, squatted down beside her, and tried to hug her. "I thought I could handle it on my own. I didn't want to hurt you." And that's when Christopher finally spoke up. He decided to stop procrastinating, because the best defense is offense. "Camille here. I love Jenna and Jenna loves me. You know we're only together because you're pregnant, because of John. So I guess I deserve to have you sleeping with my great aunt behind my back. Yes? I mean, that's so humane. Is your conscience so honorable? Well, good for you. Married a woman who accidentally knocked you up. That's all. A lifetime indulgence for all sins." Camille didn't yell, but spoke very quietly and calmly. It must have had an effect. Christopher's whole body twitched. "Camille, we didn't mean for this to happen." Jenna whispered quietly. "How did you mean it?" "Jenna, what was going through your head? We just fell in love." "Are you right?" Camille turned to Emily. "Let's go home. This really doesn't seem to make sense." "Sure, kitten, let's go," the woman eagerly responded. On the way out of the room, the deceived wife suddenly realized, "Wait, who called me on New Year's Eve? Do you have someone else? After all, clearly I did not talk to Jenna." "What?" The aunt was surprised. "I don't understand either. Who called?" questioned Christopher. The girl was forced to repeat the whole story from the beginning, about that drunken call of a stranger, which opened Camille's eyes to the stormy personal life of her spouse. Now all three women looked with anger at Christopher, who seemed to really understand nothing. "Wait, you can't sentence her like that, without a trial." "No, I really did work all night. Honestly." "You what, Jenna?" The young man took his phone out of his pocket and showed the photos and videos. Judging by the timer, he really wouldn't have had time to do anything reprehensible. In fact, he'd been sober and focused on the music all evening. Someone was probably just kidding, Emily admitted. Yeah, but it was only that stupid joke that revealed such a nasty truth. The girl exhaled bitterly. If it hadn't been for that girl, I would never have decided to become a detective, despite all my suspicions. Jenna and Christopher still had nothing to say for themselves. How would it have been possible in principle? It wasn't. Emily led her daughter away from there, deciding that they had more than enough for the day. "How are you, kitten?" Mom asked gently. "Actually, it could be better," said the girl. "I don't understand why you didn't tell me when I broke into the apartment about 10 minutes before you," answered Emily. "And actually I was watching Jenna, guessed that this fool had a lover. From her conversations with me, she didn't talk to me openly. But she's my own sister. I've known her since she was a kid. And I wanted to catch her in the act of moral decay, to put her head on straight. But when I saw Christopher in person, you can't imagine how I screamed my head off. Did you hear that before you came?" My daughter smiled. "I was standing outside the door for a while, and I didn't even know you knew those words. Yes, in such a situation, and not such a thing you can say. Moral assholes. I still can't get over it. Okay, that little asshole, he's still got no brains. What about Jenna? I can't get my head around it either," Camille admitted and exhaled bitterly. "Oh, Jenna, Emily wailed. "She's a fool. She's gone mad. What will happen now?" asked the daughter. Unfortunately, the mother herself did not know the answer to this question. She herself needed to think and digest a lot of things. Immediately after arriving home, the women began by gathering all of Christopher's belongings and put them outside the apartment. They didn't want to see him for one more second. Toward evening, my father came home from work. "I don't understand. What is going on here? Whose things are piled up outside our door?" he asked Camille sternly. He looked at his women with obvious incomprehension. "Mom. Dad doesn't know anything. Shit. Girl. Nothing. Kitten. Go to your place to be with the machine. I'll tell you everything myself," Emily said humbly. She was tired herself, but not to make her daughter recount this nightmare. "Tell me what?" Camille was even more surprised. "There's been another grief of universal proportions, just while I was at work. I'm not being ironic, Stephen. It'll be embarrassing." The wife told him everything she'd learned about her daughter and what she'd seen and been involved in. The man was in an unprecedented state, usually calm as a mammoth, no matter what was going on around him. Now he was furious. "I'm gonna kill that little prick. What a bastard. How could he? And Jenna, you're fool too. I think my sister's more to blame too. Okay, that little retard." But a 40-year-old woman should have thought. Christopher is half her age, husband to her own niece, father to her grandnephew. The latter especially strikes the fancy of BR. Camille summed it up squeamishly. "By the way, Kevin, what does he know?" Obviously, he didn't know anything as early as this afternoon, and neither did our daughter. "I hope Jenna has the courage to tell him everything. If not, I'll call and tell him myself." Emily was angry. "Are the parents yours?" In response, the spouse scolded loudly. I forgot, damn it. "Do I really have to tell them this? Poor mom and dad." This consciousness knocked Emily out of her mind completely. Yes, the husband picked up on the problem. They got caught up in their supposed love and didn't think anything of it. And now we have to deal with it. "We're fine. I'm more worried about Camille. How she's doing." "I thought she was fine. Now it's only Talik I've calmed her down." Imagine that. It's hard to imagine such a betrayal, and not only from her husband. Our poor girl. The parents were as supportive as they could be. Although, of course, it was all wrong. Such a difficult acceptance to transcend, still hard to fit in the head. How dare they? Or why didn't they confess right away? What were they counting on? The whole family was united in support of Camille. No one even thought of taking Jenna's side. Now she's a pariah in her own family. Was it worth it? That's the big question. Christopher was the only one who didn't care. He wasn't the one the whole family was cursing. The whole family took the brunt of it. The older woman who had to pull herself together and do the right thing. Or at least find the moral strength to do the right thing. Admit it, accept responsibility. This meanness was killing her even more. Rick and Wendy, Emily and Jenna's parents, arrived from out of town. The old men were grief-stricken, eager to see their great-grandson and support their granddaughter. They must have felt guilty for raising their daughter the way they did, the unhappy grandparents. What was it like for them in their old age to receive such a surprise from their beloved youngest daughter? They were literally crushed by Jenna's behavior, and not at all impressed with her behavior. I don't understand how she could do that over and over again, Wendy wondered. Evelyn's mom doesn't torture herself. Yeah, that's how Rick got into the conversation. We're old enough to know how horribly we raised our daughter. How do you stop blaming and beating yourself up? The parents' eyes were wet the whole time. Did you talk to Jenna? Emily asked tiredly. How tired was she of the whole thing? She'd given her sister a piece of her mind. Now everyone had to deal with it together. Especially the woman felt sorry for her parents and daughter, who were the worst affected by what had happened. Talking, Wendy confirmed it and couldn't find the strength to continue. She cried. She said she was an adult and was making her own decisions. She told us to mind our own business, the father explained. Good decision, nothing to say. Emily was angry. The old people had come to support their granddaughter, to help her. It turned out that Camille herself had to support them. Grandma, Grandpa, come on, everything will be all right. How could it be? We're sorry, my child. It's our fault Jenna was born like this. Wendy wailed. Stop it. If Jenna's right about anything, it's that she's been an adult for a long time and she's making her own decisions. What's that got to do with you? Except no amount of exhortation worked. The whole family's lives were turned upside down in an instant. Everyone was sick and sickened by what had happened. Christopher was forgotten, crossed out, and that was it. He's an outsider. But Jenna, everyone expected her to at least apologize. But no, she just postured like she was right. It was incredibly annoying and became a daily topic of discussion in the family. Yes, there was news, a mutual acquaintance told me. Jenna was now living with Christopher, and that was a new blow to everyone. The parents, poor parents, couldn't settle down at all. The story had been bubbling up, and it wasn't going to die down. It had been 2 months since that fateful meeting when the lovers were caught, and the family was still reeling. Everyone was in some sort of political state. What had those two done? Why did they do this to everyone? They didn't think of anyone. Couldn't they have been honest? They wouldn't have been praised, of course. But these secrets are deceptive. It seems that this trauma, this tear now for a long time with everyone, with Camille, her son, with her parents, with the poor old people, grandparents. What's all this to them for? Why should the innocent hold the answers? Suffering was Jenna, Kevin's spouse. How furious he was when he found out about his wife's cheating. And when the identity of the lover was revealed. Stephen, I did not know such words before this conversation, shared Emily with her spouse. In general, Kevin is such a calm person, intelligent, and here 10 stories of mate were not repeated. And he's so understandable. It's even scary to imagine what I would say in his place. Stephen even twitched at the thought. He's not going to give Jenna the kids. Now he's going to die, but he won't. Jack and Alex will stay with him. Are you that angry? Sincerely surprised husband. But why would such a mother? Children. She thought of them. When? But you understand. I want to say very rudely. I don't know. Emily had her doubts. What do kids have to do with it? Jenna's definitely not a bad mom. I'm sure you could have said the same thing about her 3 months ago as a prostitute sister and daughter. And now, the husband has parried. So what are you going to tell me now that she's going to steal a boyfriend from her 12-year-old daughter? The woman tried to turn the whole thing into a joke. Now, I don't know what to expect from her. Nobody does. She used to be a girl like a girl. And now she's like this. Now she's snapping at her parents, snapping at me. It's normal, undignified behavior. Poor old people. Camille was indignant. You're right, it's completely unacceptable. You know what? They sided with Kevin. I know that Dad told Jenna in the last conversation that they would support Kevin in court and insist that the children be left to him. And rightly so. Emily didn't know how much of what was going on could even be called right. All she knew was that her whole life had descended into an inferno that was getting to everyone in her family. There was nothing she could do about it. How was there to fight it? Jenna's an adult, you can't use your head. And she keeps saying we love each other, we're happy. Get off. I overheard Camille talking to a friend. The woman knew. The parents and Christopher don't communicate either. Neither accepted this betrayal of wife and son. They didn't understand this affair with a woman twice his age. They called Camille, apologized for their son, and asked to communicate with their grandson. Kind of like their relationship with Christopher had been exhausted for the time being as well. Put on pause anyway. Is that what ultimately came out of this great bond? One more tragedy for a huge number of people who were unwillingly drawn into this orbit. And all for what? Not staying together. Jenna and Christopher understand that. No love can survive such sacrifices. Deep down, each will blame the other for their losses, especially when they are so colossal. It's been almost 2 years since then. How they were able to climb out of that hole as a family then. Amazingly easy. Probably helped by the common cohesion that each tried to support the other. It's been a long time since then, and so much water has passed. It's as if nothing has changed for Camille. She's also raising her son. Her family, her parents, help her a lot. She sees the meaning of life in her John, and does not regret a bit that she has gone through a lot. But she has him, the love of her life, her own son. The girl put her personal life on pause for the time being. She had to concentrate on her studies. That's the priority now. You need to get on your feet and find independence for the sake of the baby. He needs a stable mom who can provide for him, take care of him. And all that painful stuff she's been through hasn't been conducive to getting close to people. Whether she'll ever be able to trust a stranger is a big question. Although, of course, in her heart, Camille hopes that she will meet a worthy man who will become for her, John, a wonderful father, a worthy role model. After all, with his own father, John still does not communicate. Admittedly, Camille and Christopher himself saw only once in court when they divorced. True, he pays alimony irregularly, little. But the girl does not even think to call and ask for more. She's heard that his life isn't going well. She and Jenna broke up a long time ago. Rick, their mutual acquaintance, told that Christopher, after the age beloved, has already changed a dozen girls. Deep down, Camille felt sorry for her aunt. She was left alone at a broken trough. Her family, her husband, and even her own children had turned their backs on her. When, having parted with Christopher, the woman decided to apologize, no one accepted it. Even Barbara and Alex categorically refused to communicate with their mother. The parents, too, went into denial. Betrayal superimposed on the shameless and on the boorishness of the youngest daughter. Too painful a combination. They were probably right not to take her back. How did she behave when she was living with her young lover? It's true. It's hard to get over. How can I trust her now? How do you forget everything she said back then? True. Jenna herself now attributes it to a temporary blackout. But what kind of blackout does a woman have at 41? It's a conscious choice. Too bad she was never able to accept the guilt and responsibility. Camille is trying not to judge or remember. Who's going to feel good about that? Certainly not her. The girl strives to erase all memories from her mind, leaving only life experience. No matter how much it hurts her, then scatters and crushes her. Killed? No, only taught. One must be able to remain grateful to the universe, from everything that has happened, to learn and experience. That's what Camille is trying to do now.